Junhyuk stood in the Incheon port facility at 3 a.m., watching dock workers move shipments under sodium lights. Everything was accounted for. Bills of lading matched. Customs cleared. Except one. Container 4427, B sat isolated on the northeast dock. No manifest. No origin stamp. No destination code. His logistics director stood beside him, tablet glowing in the dark. "Should we open it?" the man asked. Junhyuk didn't answer immediately. In his world, unexplained things were either traps or tests. "Who authorized the delivery?" he asked. "No one. It was on the morning shipment from Busan." Busan. The word landed differently than it should have. Junhyuk turned away from the container. "Leave it sealed. Move it to Warehouse 7. The director hesitated. "Sir, protocol requires." "I don't care about protocol." Junhyuk's voice remained even. "No one touches it until I say otherwise." He walked back toward his car. Behind him, the container sat under flickering lights, holding something that refused to follow the rules he'd spent years perfecting. His phone buzzed once. Unknown number. He slid into the back seat and closed the door before reading it. "Can you act as my husband at my ex's wedding? Just for one day." Junhyuk stared at the screen, then at the port behind him, then back to the message. He typed one word. "Why?" The reply came before his driver could start the engine. "Because he will only understand if I arrive married." Junhyuk's finger hovered over the delete button. He pressed it. The message disappeared. For exactly 4 seconds. Then he opened the deleted folder and read it again. No one called Kong Junhyuk by his first name. In Gangnam, he was Chairman Kong. In Busan, he was simply the signature. Along the West Coast ports, he was the man whose approval moved goods that governments pretended not to notice. He controlled logistics the way others controlled breathing. Naturally, inevitably, without visible effort. On Tuesday morning, he sat in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the Han River. 12 men in tailored suits presented quarterly projections. Revenue streams. Expansion timelines. Political considerations. Junhyuk listened without interrupting. When the presentation ended, he spoke once. "The Singapore route needs adjustment. Customs is asking questions they shouldn't know to ask." The room shifted. "Redirect through Malaysia," he continued. "Same timeline. Different paperwork." No one argued. The meeting dissolved. Junhyuk remained seated, watching the river move 30 floors below. Traffic formed patterns. Boats left wakes that disappeared. Everything returned to order. His phone sat face down on the table. It buzzed. Once. He ignored it. It buzzed again. Junhyuk picked it up, expecting his assistant. Expecting a supplier. Expecting anyone who should have this number. Unknown sender. "Can you act as my husband at my ex's wedding? Just for one day." He read it twice. No greeting. No explanation. No name. His private number changed every 6 months. Only 17 people had access. Each vetted. Each necessary. Each is carefully contained within the boundaries of his controlled world. He set the phone down. Outside, a boat crossed the river without caring about the question it left behind. Junhyuk poured water he didn't drink. The phone buzzed again. He picked it up faster than he intended. Why? He hadn't meant to respond. The word appeared before the decision did. The reply arrived within seconds. "Because he will only understand if I arrive married." Junhyuk stood, walked to the window, pressed his palm against the glass that didn't yield. This number had been active for 4 months. Before that, it was burned and replaced. Before that, erased. No one from his past had this number. No one living should have been able to reach him. He typed again. "Who is this?" 3 minutes passed. No response. Junhyuk deleted the conversation, powered off the phone, left the conference room. By evening, he was home. A penthouse in Hanamdong where silence cost more than most people earned in a year. He poured soju he wouldn't finish. Opened reports he wouldn't read. The phone stayed off. At midnight, he turned it back on. The message reappeared immediately. Not a new message. The same one. Still in his deleted folder. Still waiting. Junhyuk sat in the dark and studied the words again. Can you act as my husband at my ex's wedding? Just for one day. There was no manipulation in the phrasing. No desperation. No false intimacy. Just a question that assumed he already knew the answer. He opened his contacts. Scrolled to a name he hadn't used in 8 years. Hospital. Busan. 2016. The entry was blank. He'd erased it himself. Junhyuk set the phone on the table and stared at the city beyond his window. Somewhere below, weddings happened. Promises were made. People believed in permanence. He'd stopped believing in permanence the night he learned it could be bought, demolished, and rebuilt into something that never remembered what it replaced. The phone buzzed. One final message. The wedding is Saturday. Shilla Hotel. I'll be wearing the hairpin you gave me. Junhyuk's chest tightened. He hadn't given anyone a hairpin. He'd dropped one. 8 years ago. Outside a hospital that no longer existed. The tea house sat between Bukshan's preserved hanok houses and the tourist routes that never found it. Junhyuk arrived at 2 p.m. She was already seated. Kim Seo-yeon. He'd found her name within 6 hours. Employment records. Education history. Current residence in Mapogu. Nothing remarkable. Nothing hidden. Nothing explained how she'd reached him. She didn't stand when he entered. Didn't smile. Didn't acknowledge his arrival beyond a single glance that measured without judging. Junhyuk sat across from her. The table between them was small, wooden, and older than both of them. Seo-yeon wore a dark gray hanbok, modernized but respectful. Her hair was pulled back simply. No jewelry except one piece. A jade hairpin, cracked near the base. She placed it on the table between them. Not as a gift. Not as proof. As punctuation. Junhyuk looked at it longer than he should have. Where did you get that? He asked. Seo-yeon folded her hands. You dropped it 8 years ago. Outside a hospital in Busan. The tea house was quiet. Other tables held couples speaking softly. An elderly man read a newspaper. Life continued around them without noticing the fracture. Junhyuk's expression remained controlled. That hospital was demolished. I know, she said. Everything from that site was cleared. Everything except what I kept. She didn't elaborate. Junhyuk studied her. Late 20s. Composed. The kind of stillness that came from practice, not personality. You want me to pretend to be your husband, he said. Yes. Why me? Seo-yeon didn't answer immediately. She lifted her teacup. Drank slowly. Set it down with precision. Because you understand what it means to erase someone, she finally said. The words landed without accusation. Junhyuk leaned back slightly. I don't know you. No, Seo-yeon agreed. But I know you. She slid a folded invitation across the table. Cream-colored paper. Embossed lettering. Expensive in the way that announced itself quietly. Park Min-jae and Lee Ji-won cordially invite you to celebrate their union. Saturday, 6 p.m. The Shilla Hotel, Seoul. Junhyuk recognized the name before reading it. Park Min-jae. Third-generation chaebol. Board member of Hanseong Electronics. The kind of man who appeared in business journals, photographed at charity galas, never at actual work. Your ex, Junhyuk said. Yes. You want him to see you've moved on. Seo-yeon's expression didn't change. I want him to see that some things can't be controlled. Junhyuk stood. This is a mistake, he said. Seo-yeon remained seated. The hairpin was never meant to be kept. It was meant to be returned. Junhyuk stopped. The tea house continued around them. Tea was poured. Conversations continued. Time moved forward. He sat back down. Seo-yeon's gaze held steady. I'm not asking you to care. I'm asking you to appear. For one day. Yes. And after. After is your decision. Junhyuk picked up the hairpin. The crack ran deeper than surface damage. It had been broken, then carefully preserved. Why keep it? He asked. Seo-yun finally looked away. Toward the window. Toward the preserved houses and the history they insisted on maintaining. Because throwing it away would have meant believing it never mattered, she said. She stood. Saturday, 6 p.m., she repeated. You don't need to love me. You don't need to remember me. You only need to stand beside me when he realizes power isn't permanent. She left the tea house. The hairpin remained on the table. Junhyuk sat alone with it. Outside, Seoul continued. Weddings were planned. Invitations were sent. People prepared to witness promises they assumed would hold. He closed his hand around the jade. It was lighter than he remembered. And colder. The Shilla Hotel didn't host weddings for ordinary people. Junhyuk stood in his office on Wednesday morning, studying the venue's layout on his tablet. 3 ballrooms. Private gardens. Security protocols designed for diplomats and CEOs who required discretion more than decoration. Park Min-jae had reserved the grand ballroom. Capacity: 400 guests. Junhyuk scrolled through the guest list his analyst had compiled overnight. Politicians. Entertainment executives. Second-generation chaebol heirs. 3 Samsung board members. A former Blue House advisor. This wasn't a wedding. It was a consolidation. His assistant entered without knocking. The background check you requested, she said, placing a folder on his desk. Junhyuk opened it. Park Min-jae. Age 32. Seoul National University. Economics. MBA from Wharton. Currently VP of International Operations at Hanseong Electronics. Clean record. Charitable donations. No scandals. Too clean. Junhyuk flipped to the next section. Business dealings. Shell companies in Singapore. Import-export records showing electronic shipments through Incheon and Busan ports. His ports. He read further. 3 months ago, 1 container disappeared from the Incheon manifest. Electronics bound for Vietnam. Value: 800 million won. The container never reached its destination. Junhyuk set down the folder. He picked up his phone and dialed. The missing Hanseong container, he said when his logistics director answered. Pull the full chain of custody. Sir, we closed that investigation. Insurance covered. I didn't ask what insurance covered. Pull the file. Junhyuk ended the call. He returned to the background report. Flipped to the final page. Sealed records. Access restricted. 2 court cases. Both dismissed. Both files are locked behind judicial orders that shouldn't exist for civil matters. Junhyuk made another call. I need a favor, he told the prosecutor who owed him 3. By Thursday afternoon, he had names. Witnesses who recanted. Employees who resigned suddenly. 1 woman who filed a complaint, then withdrew it 48 hours later. Kim Seo-yun. The complaint was dated 9 years ago. The details were redacted. But the case number matched one of Min-jae's sealed files. Junhyuk sat in his office as evening traffic began below. The Han River reflected buildings that pretended permanence. Everything looked solid from a distance. He opened his phone. Typed a message to Seo-yun. I'll be there Saturday. Her response arrived within minutes. Thank you. Nothing else. Junhyuk stood and walked to the window. He'd agreed to attend a wedding for a woman he didn't remember, to face a man whose secrets touched his own operations, in a room filled with people who would recognize the disruption immediately. This wasn't strategy. This was the kind of mistake powerful men made when they forgot that control was always temporary. His phone buzzed again. Wear something traditional. He'll expect a suit. Junhyuk almost smiled. Almost. Saturday arrived without ceremony. Junhyuk stood in his dressing room at 4 p.m., adjusting a charcoal durumagi over dark hanbok pants. The traditional overcoat was tailored precisely. Understated. The kind of formality that announced itself through restraint rather than decoration. His driver arrived at 5. They collected Seo Yun from her apartment in Mapo-gu at 5:30. She waited outside wearing a deep blue hanbok, geoggery fitted, chima flowing. The jade hairpin secured her hair. She carried nothing else. She entered the car without speaking. They drove toward Jangcheongdong in silence. The Shilla Hotel rose against Namsan Mountain like a declaration. Traditional Korean architecture modernized into luxury. Gardens surrounded the entrance. Valet attendants moved in choreographed precision. Junhyuk's car stopped at the main entrance. Cameras were already positioned. Not wedding photographers. Press. Seo Yun noticed them at the same moment. He invited media. He wants documentation, Junhyuk said. They exited the vehicle together. Flashes erupted immediately. Junhyuk placed his hand on Seo Yun's lower back. Not possessive. Guiding. They walked through the entrance as questions shouted behind them remained unanswered. Inside, the grand ballroom had been transformed. White peonies from Jeju covered every surface. A string quartet played Gyeogeum arrangements of modern compositions. Tables were set with porcelain so fine it appeared translucent. Guests clustered in groups determined by influence rather than friendship. The room shifted when Junhyuk and Seo Yun entered. Conversations didn't stop. They slowed. Heads turned with a careful control of people trained never to stare directly. A woman in Chanel whispered to her companion. A CEO Junhyuk recognized from shipping negotiations studied him without approaching. 3 politicians near the bar redirected their attention simultaneously. Seo Yun's hand rested lightly on his arm. They moved deeper into the room. The traditional pie-beak ceremony area was arranged near the front. Low tables. Cushions. Space for the bride and groom to bow before elders and receive blessings. Min Jae stood near the altar, greeting guests. He wore a blue gwanbok, the traditional groom's attire, embroidered with gold thread. Expensive. Historically accurate. Exactly what someone would wear if they wanted to appear rooted in tradition while building an empire that ignored it. He saw them. His smile remained. But something behind his eyes adjusted. Seo Yun led Junhyuk to their assigned table. Table 7. Not close to the family. Not relegated to the back. Precisely positioned where everyone could see them without having to acknowledge them. As they sat, Junhyuk noticed security. Not hotel staff. Private contractors. 6 positioned along the walls. 2 near the exits. All watching guests with attention that exceeded normal wedding caution. One of them was watching Junhyuk specifically. The ceremony began at 6:15. The bride entered in a traditional wallet, red and gold embroidered silk that cost more than most cars. She moved with practiced grace toward Min Jae. Junhyuk watched the groom instead. Min Jae's attention kept drifting. Toward table 7. Toward Seo Yun. Toward the man beside her that he hadn't anticipated. The officiant spoke about partnership. Harmony. Building futures together. Seo Yun's expression remained neutral. Junhyuk leaned slightly toward her. He's had you watched since we arrived. I know, she said quietly. This doesn't bother you? It confirms I chose correctly. The ceremony concluded. The couple bowed to elders. Guests applauded with controlled enthusiasm. Reception began immediately. Min Jae moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations. His bride smiled beside him, perfect and rehearsed. But his trajectory was deliberate. He was moving toward table 7. Junhyuk stood before Min Jae reached them. They met near the bar, away from immediate witnesses. Min Jae extended his hand. I don't believe we've met. Junhyuk accepted the handshake. Measured pressure. No dominance display. Kong Junhyuk. Recognition flickered. Of Daehan Logistics. Yes. Min Jae's smile tightened imperceptibly. I didn't realize Seo Yun had remarried. She didn't mention it? We haven't spoken in some time. Junhyuk said nothing. Min Jae continued. Your company handles significant port operations. We facilitate movement. including Hanseong shipments. Among others. The conversation held weight that the words themselves didn't carry. Min Jae glanced toward Seo Yun. She looks well. She is. I'm glad. Min Jae's tone remained pleasant. This city can be difficult for people who don't understand how things work. Jun Hyuk met his gaze. I've found it's more difficult for people who think they do. Min Jae's smile disappeared for exactly 2 seconds. Then returned. Enjoy the reception, he said, walking away. Jun Hyuk remained at the bar. The security contractor who'd been watching him earlier was now speaking into a concealed microphone. This wasn't just a wedding. Someone was documenting everything. The reception continued through dinner service. Galbi, japchae, dishes arranged with precision on tables that cost more to rent than most people's monthly salary. Guests ate carefully, maintaining conversations that mattered more than the food. Jun Hyuk barely touched his plate. Seo Yun ate slowly, methodically, without apparent tension. At 8 p.m., guests began moving to the terrace gardens. The evening air was cool. Namsan Tower glowed above them. Seoul spread below in organized light. Jun Hyuk stepped outside alone. Min Jae found him there 5 minutes later. No bride beside him now. No witnesses except distant guests who couldn't hear. We should talk, Min Jae said. Jun Hyuk didn't turn. About mutual interests. I wasn't aware we had any. Min Jae moved to the railing. Stood close enough for conversation, far enough to maintain plausible casualness if observed. Hanseong ships through your facilities, Min Jae said. 70 containers monthly. That's not coincidence. It's business. Business built on understanding. Min Jae's tone remained even. Understanding that certain shipments move without excessive documentation. Jun Hyuk finally looked at him. What are you implying? Nothing. Just acknowledging reality. Min Jae pulled out his phone. Showed a shipping manifest. Container 4427B. Arrived Incheon 3 weeks ago. No origin stamp. No customs clearance. Jun Hyuk's expression didn't change. That container sat in your warehouse for 17 days, Min Jae continued. Then disappeared from all records. Clerical error. Convenient error. Min Jae pocketed his phone. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm simply noting that we operate in overlapping spaces. Jun Hyuk turned fully toward him. The container you're referencing was flagged for inspection. It contained electronics bound for Singapore under falsified certificates of origin. Chinese manufacturing disguised as Korean exports to avoid tariffs. Min Jae's jaw tightened slightly. I redirected it, Jun Hyuk continued, because customs was asking questions I didn't want answered. Questions that would have traced back to shell companies registered in your name. Silence. Around them, wedding guests laughed. Champagne glasses clinked. Life continued. Min Jae exhaled slowly. Then we understand each other. Do we? You protect your operations. I protect mine. Min Jae glanced toward the ballroom. Toward Seo Yun visible through the glass. But you should be careful about the company you keep. Meaning Seo Yun has a history of poor judgment. Min Jae's voice dropped. 9 years ago, she made accusations. Serious ones. Against me. I know. Min Jae's eyes narrowed. Then you know they were withdrawn. I know they were sealed. Because they were false. Or inconvenient. Min Jae stepped closer. This city runs on agreements. Unspoken ones. You understand that better than most. Seo Yun never learned how to navigate that reality. She believed in systems that don't protect people like her. People like her? People without leverage. Min Jae's expression hardened. You standing beside her tonight doesn't change that. She's already been accounted for. The phrase landed with weight. Accounted for. Jun Hyuk kept his voice level. Accounted for how? Min Jae smiled. You're intelligent enough to know I won't answer that. But you're also smart enough to recognize when someone is warning you professionally rather than personally. He turned to leave. Stopped. The container you redirected, Min-jae said without looking back. It wasn't the only one. And they won't all be as easy to disappear. He walked back into the reception. Jun-hyuk remained on the terrace. Below, Seoul moved. Traffic flowed. Systems operated. His phone buzzed. A message from his logistics director. Container 4427B was opened. Contents verified as electronics. But there was something else inside. Calling you now. Jun-hyuk didn't answer the incoming call. He looked back through the glass walls. Seo-yeon stood alone near their table, holding a glass of wine she wasn't drinking. Min-jae was speaking with his bride. Security contractors were positioned differently now. Closer to the exits. Watching him specifically. Jun-hyuk pocketed his phone and returned inside. When he reached Seo-yeon, he spoke quietly. We're leaving. The reception isn't over. It is for us. She studied his expression. Read something there. Set down her glass. They walked toward the exit together. Behind them, conversations continued. Music played. The wedding concluded successfully. But 3 security contractors followed them to the parking level. Not close enough to stop them. Close enough to document exactly when they left. They didn't speak during the drive. Jun-hyuk's driver navigated evening traffic back toward Mapo-gu. Seo-yeon sat with her hands folded, the jade hairpin still securing her hair. When they reached her building, she opened the door herself. Thank you, she said. Jun-hyuk stepped out with her. We need to talk. Not here. She led him inside without waiting for agreement. Her apartment was smaller than he expected. 3rd floor. Single bedroom. Living space that held a low table, floor cushions, and minimal furniture. Books lined one wall. Nothing decorative except a single framed photograph turned face down on a shelf. Seo-yeon removed the hairpin. Set it on the table between them. You can leave now, she said. Jun-hyuk remained standing. Min-jae said you'd been accounted for. I know what he said. What does that mean? Seo-yeon moved to the window. Outside, Mapo-gu's streets were quieter than Gangnam's. Fewer lights. Less pretense. It means he's been waiting for me to surface, she said. And I just gave him reason to act. By bringing me. By reminding him that some things refuse to stay buried. Jun-hyuk studied her profile. The careful control. The stillness that wasn't peace but practice. The hospital in Busan, he said. Tell me what happened there. Seo-yeon turned. You already know. I know it was demolished. I know records were erased. I don't know why you were there. She walked to the bookshelf. Picked up the face-down photograph. Looked at it for 3 seconds. Put it back without showing him. My father worked as a driver, she said. Not for you directly. For one of your contracted logistics companies. He transported shipments from Busan port to distribution centers. Jun-hyuk waited. One night, he was told to deliver a container to a warehouse outside the city. No manifest. No documentation. Just an address. Her voice remained steady. He did what he was told. But he saw what was inside when they opened it. What was inside? Electronics. But underneath, something else. Something that shouldn't have been there. Jun-hyuk's chest tightened. He reported it, Seo-yeon continued. Not to police. To his supervisor. To the people he thought would handle it correctly. And 3 days later, he had an accident. His car went off the road near Houndie. He was taken to that hospital. The room felt smaller. The doctors said he would recover, Seo-yeon said. Minor injuries. Observation for 48 hours. I stayed with him. We talked about what he'd seen. What he should do. Whether silence was safer than truth. She picked up the hairpin again. You came to the hospital that night, she said. I didn't know who you were then. Just someone in an expensive coat who walked through the corridor like he owned it. You spoke with doctors. With administrators. I watched you drop this hairpin outside his room. Jun-hyuk remembered. Not clearly. Not completely. But enough. A facility that needed quieting. Questions that needed stopping. Problems that required administrative solutions rather than legal ones. Your father, he said quietly, died the next morning. Heart failure. Unexpected. Unexplained. Seo-yun's expression didn't change. The hospital called it natural causes. His body was found within hours. The investigation closed before it opened. I didn't. I know you didn't kill him. Her voice remained level. But you erased what happened. The hospital was bought by a development company 6 months later. Demolished within a year. Every record, every staff member, every witness, scattered or paid or relocated. Jun-hyuk sat slowly on the floor cushion. I kept the hairpin, Seo-yun said, because it was the only proof that night existed. That someone with power had walked through that corridor and everything changed. Why didn't you come forward? I tried. She returned to the window. I filed a complaint. Against the hospital. Against the logistics company. Against Min Jae. Min Jae. The shipment my father saw came through Hanseong subsidiaries. Min Jae was junior operations then. Not responsible directly. But connected enough that my complaint touched his department. Jun-hyuk understood now. He made it disappear, Seo-yun said. Used his family's influence. Sealed the files. Convinced me that pursuing it would only hurt me. That systems protect people like him, not people like my father. She turned back to face him. So I withdrew the complaint. I stayed quiet. I learned how power actually works in this city. Her eyes met his. And I waited. For what? For the right moment to make them both see me. Jun-hyuk picked up the hairpin. Min Jae tonight. Me 8 years ago. Yes. This was never about the wedding. No. Seo-yun moved closer. The wedding was theater. Min Jae needed to see that I wasn't afraid anymore. That I could stand in his world without permission. And me. She knelt across from him. You needed to see that the past doesn't disappear just because you pay for it to. The apartment was silent. Outside, a siren passed. Jun-hyuk set the hairpin down carefully. I can't undo what happened. I'm not asking you to. Then what are you asking? Seo-yun's voice dropped. I'm asking you to finally see me. Not as a problem to solve. Not as leverage to manage. As someone who was there when you chose power over truth. Jun-hyuk stood. Walked to the door. Stopped with his hand on the handle. I remember your father, he said without turning. He asked questions about a shipment. Questions that would have exposed operations I couldn't afford to lose. Seo-yun didn't respond. I didn't order anything, Jun-hyuk continued. But I made sure the investigation stopped. I convinced administrators that closure was better than truth. I erased what needed erasing. He opened the door. I'm sorry. He left. The hairpin remained on her table. Unreturned. Unresolved. Sunday morning arrived without resolution. Jun-hyuk sat in his office overlooking the Han River, reading reports that no longer held his attention. His phone buzzed. His logistics director. The container from Incheon, the man said. We found something. Explain. Hidden compartment. Beneath the electronics. Documents. Financial records. Transfer histories dating back 9 years. Jun-hyuk's grip tightened. Whose records? Multiple companies. Shell corporations. But they all trace back to Hanseong subsidiaries. Send everything to my private server. Sir, these records, if they're discovered, they won't be. Jun-hyuk ended the call. He spent the next 3 hours reviewing files that shouldn't exist. Import-export fraud. Falsified certificates of origin. Money laundering through logistics networks. Every transaction carefully structured. Every trail designed to disappear. And his own company's name appeared 17 times. Not as primary operator. As facilitator. Junhyuk leaned back in his chair. Someone had compiled evidence against both Hanseong and Daehan Logistics. Someone with access to internal systems. Someone who understood how to document crimes that powerful people believed were invisible. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. The container was never about electronics. It was about proof. Junhyuk typed quickly. Who is this? Someone who understands what Min Jae meant by accounted for. He stood. Walked to the window. Soul spread below, organized and indifferent. What do you want? I want you to decide if power matters more than truth. The conversation ended. Junhyuk called his attorney. I need everything on Park Min Jae, he said. Legal cases. Business partnerships. Anyone he's paid to stay quiet. That's extensive. I have time. By Monday afternoon, patterns emerged. 6 former employees. 3 settled lawsuits. 2 sealed arbitrations. All involving people who'd seen things they shouldn't have. One name repeated. Kim Dae-young. Seo Yun's father. Junhyuk opened his private files. Searched his own archived records from 2016. Found a memo he'd written himself. Busan facility incident resolved. Driver deceased. Hospital records secured. No further action required. He'd signed it personally. Tuesday morning, he drove to Busan. The hospital site was now luxury apartments. 20 floors. River views. Prices that ensured only certain people could afford to live where others had disappeared. Junhyuk stood across the street for 15 minutes. Then drove to Haeundae. The road where Seo Yun's father crashed was unchanged. Narrow. Winding. Dangerous if you weren't careful. Or if someone wanted it to look like you weren't careful. He parked. Walked the curve where the accident occurred. Skid marks had long since faded. No memorial. No marker. Nothing that remembered. His phone buzzed. Seo Yun. Where are you? He typed the location. I'll come to you. She arrived an hour later. Parked behind his car. Stepped out wearing jeans and a simple coat. They stood together on the roadside. I come here once a year, she said. On his birthday. Junhyuk said nothing. I used to be angry, Seo Yun continued. At you. At Min Jae. At systems that let powerful people erase inconvenient people. You're not angry anymore? I'm tired. She looked at the curve. Anger doesn't bring him back. It just keeps me here. Junhyuk turned toward her. The container. The documents. You arranged that. No. Then who? Someone else your past caught up with. She met his eyes. You weren't the only person who had things to hide. And you weren't the only one who thought erasure was permanent. A truck passed, disrupting the moment. When it cleared, Seo Yun spoke again. There's something you should see. She led him back to her car. Opened the trunk. Inside was a box. Old. Weathered. She removed a document. Death certificate. Kim Dae-young. Natural causes. Beneath it, another document. Medical examiner's preliminary report. Typed. Official. Cause of death. Cardiac arrest induced by pharmaceutical intervention. Junhyuk's breath stopped. This wasn't filed, Seo Yun said. It was buried. The examiner who wrote it left the country 3 weeks later. How did you get this? I've spent 8 years collecting pieces. Not for revenge. For proof that what happened to my father wasn't an accident. She handed him one more document. A legal filing. Dated yesterday. Civil complaint against Park Min Jae, Hanseong Electronics, and associated entities. Plaintiff. Kim Seo Yun. Attached evidence. Financial records. Medical documentation. Witness statements. Junhyuk looked up. You're filing. Tomorrow morning. They'll bury this. They'll try. Her voice hardened. But the documents from that container are already with prosecutors. Anonymous submission. Complete chain of custody. Evidence they can't ignore even if they want to. Junhyuk handed back the papers. Your name is in those records, Seo-yun said quietly. I know. This will destroy what you've built. Probably. And you're going to let me file anyway. Junhyuk looked at the road. At the place where her father's life ended because someone decided truth was worth less than convenience. Yes, he said. Seo-yun studied him. Why? Because I'm tired too. They stood in silence as afternoon became evening. Finally, Seo-yun returned to her car. Junhyuk watched her drive away. Then he made a call. The Hanseong records, he told his attorney. Don't destroy them. Preserve everything. Complete documentation. Sir, that's evidence against. I know what it is. Junhyuk's voice remained steady. Preserve it anyway. He ended the call. Got in his car. Drove back to Seoul with the weight of decisions that couldn't be reversed. Wednesday morning, Junhyuk woke to 17 missed calls. His attorney. His board members. Government contacts who usually maintained careful distance. Headlines had erupted overnight. Chaebol Air faces fraud charges. Hanseong Electronics under investigation. Prosecutors seize financial records spanning decade. Junhyuk read the articles methodically. Park Min-jae's assets frozen. Company accounts locked pending investigation. International shipments halted. But buried in the 8th paragraph of every article was another name. Daehan Logistics named as potential co-conspirator. His phone rang. He answered. You need to make a statement, his attorney said. Distance yourself from Hanseong. Claim you were unaware of. No. Sir, if you don't respond, they'll assume complicity. Let them assume. Junhyuk ended the call. He dressed. Drove to his office. Arrived to find 3 board members waiting in his conference room. We need immediate action, the eldest said. This association will destroy shareholder confidence. Association. Junhyuk sat. We facilitated their shipments for 6 years. That's not association. That's partnership. You're saying we're guilty? I'm saying we're complicit. There's a difference, but not one that matters legally. Silence. Then we fight, another member said. Hire the best attorneys. Seal the records. Make this disappear. Junhyuk looked at each of them. Men who'd built empires through careful calculations. Who understood that power required maintenance. No, he said. Excuse me. We're not fighting. We're cooperating. Full disclosure. Complete documentation. Every shipment. Every payment. Every record. The room erupted. Junhyuk let them argue for 3 minutes. Then raised his hand once. They stopped. I've already contacted prosecutors, he said. They'll have everything by Friday. One board member stood. Then you're resigning. Effective immediately. No, Junhyuk said again. I'm staying. And taking full responsibility. They left. By afternoon, his resignation demands reached 12. He ignored all of them. At 5 p.m., there was a knock on his office door. Seo-yun entered. She wore business attire. Carried a leather folder. You didn't have to do this, she said. Junhyuk gestured to the chair across from him. Yes, I did. She sat. Placed the folder on his desk. Inside were documents. Legal filings. Official stamps. Marriage certificate registered. Busan District Court, April 2016 parties. Kong Junhyuk, Kim Seo-yun. Junhyuk stared at the document. This isn't possible, he said. It's legal, Seo-yun replied. Filed 8 years ago. Signed by you. I never signed a marriage certificate. You signed a guardianship document. When my father died. You authorized emergency medical decisions. Transfer of remains. Financial settlement. Junhyuk remembered now. Paperwork thrust at him by hospital administrators. Documents that needed signatures to close the incident quickly. I signed a settlement. You signed multiple documents. Seo-yun's voice remained calm. One was a guardianship transfer. In Korean family law, that document, combined with cohabitation evidence and financial support, constitutes legal marriage recognition. There was no cohabitation. I lived in company housing for 3 months after my father died. Housing your company provided. Rent paid through your accounts. Jun-hyuk stood, walked to the window. You've known about this for 8 years. Yes. And you never mentioned it. I was waiting for the right time. He turned. Why now? Seo-yun stood, moved beside him. Because Min Jae just discovered it too, she said. His attorneys found the filing yesterday. They're trying to use it to discredit my complaint. Claim I have ulterior motives. That I manipulated you into cooperation. Did you? No. Her eyes held his. I asked you to appear at a wedding. You chose everything after that. Jun-hyuk looked back at the certificate. This makes me legally liable for your actions. Yes. Any debts you have become mine. Yes. And any charges filed against you become yours as well. She picked up the document. I can file for annulment. It will take time, but it's possible. Or you can let it stand. Why would I do that? Because standing together matters more than standing clean. Sirens echoed faintly from the streets below. Jun-hyuk thought about the past 8 years. About hospitals that disappeared. About drivers who asked questions. About systems designed to protect people like him at the expense of people like her father. The marriage stands, he said. Seo-yun studied his expression. This will complicate everything. Everything's already complicated. She almost smiled. Min Jae's attorneys will use this against us. Let them. Prosecutors will question the timing. They should. Jun-hyuk turned fully toward her. For 8 years, you've carried proof of my failure. You could have used it for leverage. For revenge. For personal gain. I didn't want revenge. What did you want? Seo-yun set the certificate on his desk. I wanted someone to acknowledge that what happened to my father mattered. That his life wasn't worth less than business convenience. Outside, Seoul continued. Traffic moved. Buildings stood. Systems operated. You're filing criminal charges tomorrow, Jun-hyuk said. Yes. Against Min Jae. Against Han Seong. Yes. My name will be included. Probably. Jun-hyuk picked up the marriage certificate. Studied his signature from 8 years ago. Written quickly. Without attention. Without understanding what it would become. Then we file together, he said. As legal partners. Complete disclosure. Joint testimony. Seo-yun's breath caught. That will guarantee prosecution. I know. You'll lose everything. Not everything. He handed her the document. Just the parts that should never have been built on erasure. She took the certificate. Folded it carefully. Placed it back in the leather folder. Thank you, she said quietly. She walked toward the door. Stopped with her hand on the handle. The hairpin, she said without turning. I kept it because throwing it away would have meant accepting that power always wins. Jun-hyuk said nothing. But keeping it meant believing that someday, someone would prove power has limits. She opened the door. You just did. She left. Jun-hyuk stood alone in his office as night settled over Seoul. On his desk, his phone showed 32 new messages. Attorneys demanding strategy. Board members demanding action. Contacts demanding distance. He powered it off. Sat in darkness. And waited for consequences he'd finally stopped trying to avoid. Thursday morning, prosecutors arrived at Daehan Logistics headquarters at 8 a.m. Jun-hyuk met them in the lobby. We have a warrant, the lead prosecutor said. I know. Jun-hyuk handed him a tablet. Complete access to our server network. Financial records. Shipping manifests. Communication logs dating back 10 years. The prosecutor studied him. You're cooperating? Completely. By noon, investigators occupied 3 floors. Boxes of documents were catalogued. Hard drives were seized. Employees were interviewed individually. Junhyuk remained in his office, answering questions without an attorney present. The Hanseong shipments, a prosecutor asked. Were you aware of their contents? Not specifically. Did you suspect illegal activity? Junhyuk paused. Yes. When did you first suspect? April 2016. After a driver reported irregularities in a Busan shipment. What action did you take? I closed the inquiry. The room was silent. Why? The prosecutor asked. Because the truth would have exposed operational vulnerabilities I couldn't afford to address publicly. The prosecutor made notes. You're confessing to obstruction? I'm stating what happened. The investigation continued through the afternoon. By evening, preliminary charges were drafted. Facilitation of smuggling operations, obstruction of investigations, conspiracy to defraud customs authorities. Junhyuk read them without reaction. We'll need you to surrender your passport, the prosecutor said. Junhyuk handed it over. Meanwhile, across Seoul, Min Jae's world was collapsing faster. Hanseong electronic stock dropped by 43% in one day. International partners suspended contracts. Board members called emergency meetings. By Friday, Min Jae was placed on administrative leave. Saturday morning, he appeared at Junhyuk's building. Security called up. Park Min Jae is requesting access. Junhyuk considered refusing. Send him up. Min Jae entered the penthouse looking diminished. Expensive suit. Perfect grooming. But something essential had cracked. You did this, Min Jae said. Junhyuk poured tea he didn't offer to share. I did what I should have done 8 years ago. You destroyed us both. I exposed what already existed. Min Jae moved to the window. Looked at Seoul spreading below. We could have managed this. Contained it. Protected our positions. I'm tired of containment. So you chose noble confession? Min Jae's voice hardened. You think prosecutors will treat you differently because you cooperated? You think the public will forgive you because you admitted guilt? I don't need forgiveness. Then what do you need? Junhyuk set down his cup. To stop pretending the past disappeared. Min Jae laughed without humor. The past. You mean Seo-yun's father. One driver. One inconvenient death. Yes. He was collateral damage. That's how systems work. You understood that better than anyone. I did. Junhyuk stood. That's why I'm changing what I understand. Min Jae turned from the window. She manipulated you. Used guilt. Used that ridiculous marriage certificate. You realize she planned this for years. I know. And you're fine with that? She had every right to plan it. Min Jae stepped closer. You're destroying everything you built for someone who wanted revenge. No. Junhyuk's voice remained level. I'm destroying what I built incorrectly. There's a difference. They stood in silence. Finally, Min Jae moved toward the door. The prosecutors won't stop with us. They'll investigate everyone. Every partner. Every facilitator. This city runs on agreements you're breaking. Good. Min Jae opened the door. Stopped. You think this makes you better than me, he said. It doesn't. It just makes you weaker. He left. Junhyuk returned to the window. Below, Seoul continued. Buildings stood. Systems operated. But cracks were forming. Sunday evening. Seo-yun called. Min Jae's attorney contacted me, she said. Settlement offer. Full financial compensation. In exchange for withdrawing the complaint. Are you considering it? No. Pause. Are you? No. They're offering 30 billion won. Junhyuk almost laughed. They think money fixes everything. It usually does. Not this time. Silence on the line. I'm leaving Seoul, Seo-yeon said finally. Junhyuk's chest tightened. When? After the trial. Whenever that happens. Her voice was quiet. There's nothing left for me here. Where will you go? I don't know yet. Somewhere without memories. Junhyuk wanted to ask her to stay. Wanted to suggest alternatives. Wanted to explain that starting over together might matter more than starting over alone. Instead, he said, I understand. Do you? You've spent 8 years in a city that buried your father. You deserve to leave. Another pause. The hairpin, Seo-yeon said. I'm leaving it at your building. Front desk. You should have it. Why? Because keeping it was about waiting. And the waiting is finished. She ended the call. Monday morning, Junhyuk went downstairs. The front desk had a small box. Plain. Unmarked. Inside was the jade hairpin. Still cracked. Still preserved. He carried it back upstairs. Set it on the table where city lights reflected through floor-to-ceiling windows. That afternoon, more charges were filed. More assets were frozen. More investigations were launched. Junhyuk's attorney called every hour with updates he barely processed. By evening, his company's operational control was transferred to a court-appointed manager. His penthouse was the only thing that remained his. For now. He sat in darkness, watching Seoul glow. The hairpin caught light from the city below. Fragile. Broken. Refusing to disappear. 3 weeks passed. Preliminary hearings began. Evidence was presented. Testimonies were scheduled. Junhyuk appeared at every proceeding. Answered every question. Confirmed every document. His legal team argued for reduced charges. Claimed cooperation should matter. Suggested that contrition deserved consideration. The prosecutors were unmoved. Min Jae's team fought differently. Denied involvement. Challenged evidence. Attacked witnesses. Seo-yeon testified on a Wednesday morning. Junhyuk sat in the gallery, watching her speak with careful precision. She described her father's death. The hospital. The investigation that never happened. She never looked at him during her testimony. When asked about the marriage certificate, she confirmed its validity. Did you use this document to manipulate Mr. Kang's testimony? Min Jae's attorney asked. No. But you knew about it for 8 years and never mentioned it? I was waiting for the right moment. The right moment to leverage it for personal gain? Seo-yeon's expression remained calm. The right moment for someone to acknowledge what happened to my father mattered. The courtroom was silent. After testimony concluded, Junhyuk left the building through a side exit. Reporters waited anyway. Mr. Kang, do you regret your actions? Mr. Kang, will you file for annulment? Mr. Kang, what do you say to those who claim you enabled criminal activity? He didn't answer. Got in his car. Drove to Busan. The luxury apartments still occupied the space where the hospital once stood. 20 floors of expensive forgetting. Junhyuk parked across the street. Sat for an hour. Then drove to the roadside where Kim Dae-young died. The curve was unchanged. No memorial. No marker. Nothing that remembered except the people who chose to. He stood there until sunset. His phone buzzed. Seo-yeon. I'm at Incheon Airport. Junhyuk typed quickly. When is your flight? 2 hours. He checked the time. Calculated distance. Traffic conditions. He could make it. His finger hovered over the keyboard. Then stopped. She'd spent 8 years waiting for acknowledgement. For truth. For someone to prove that her father's death hadn't been meaningless. He'd given her that. Chasing her to an airport wouldn't change anything. Wouldn't undo what happened. Wouldn't transform legal partnership into something more permanent. It would only be another powerful man deciding what someone else needed instead of respecting what they chose. He typed a different message. Thank you for waiting. Her response came 5 minutes later. Thank you for finally seeing. Nothing else. Junhyuk pocketed his phone, stood on the roadside as darkness gathered, finally returned to his car, drove back to Seoul. By the time he reached his building, her flight had departed. He took the elevator to his penthouse. The city glowed below. Traffic moved. Systems continued operating despite the cracks. On his table, the jade hairpin rested where he'd left it. He picked it up, felt the weight of something cheap that had become invaluable through what it witnessed. His phone buzzed. His attorney. The prosecutor is offering a plea agreement. Reduced charges in exchange for continued cooperation and significant financial penalties. What charges? Obstruction. Facilitation. You'd avoid prison but lose operational control permanently. Junhyuk looked at the hairpin. And if I refuse? Full trial. Maximum exposure. Possible incarceration. When do they need an answer? Tomorrow morning. Junhyuk ended the call. He stood at the window, watching Seoul pretend nothing had changed. But something had. The container that shouldn't have existed had exposed operations that powerful men thought were invisible. A woman who'd been dismissed as powerless had proven that patience could be stronger than force. A marriage that no one remembered signing had become the framework for accountability. And a jade hairpin, dropped carelessly, kept carefully, returned finally, had outlasted every attempt to erase what it represented. Junhyuk's reflection stared back from the glass. He looked older, tired, less certain of the systems he'd once trusted to maintain order. But for the first time in 8 years, he didn't look away. His phone sat on the table. The plea agreement awaited response. The hairpin rested beside it. Outside, Seoul moved forward. And Junhyuk stood with a choice that couldn't be delayed any longer. Accept protection and preserve what remained of his power. Or refuse compromise and let consequences arrive without negotiation. The hairpin caught city light. Still cracked. Still whole enough to matter. He picked up his phone. But before he could type anything, one final message arrived. Unknown number. The debt isn't settled until you decide which matters more. The empire you built or the truth it was built on. Junhyuk stared at the screen. Then at the hairpin. Then at Seoul, spreading below in organized light that pretended permanence. He set down the phone without responding. The message remained unanswered. The plea agreement remained unsigned. And the jade hairpin remained exactly where Seo Yun had left it. Unreturned. Unresolved. Proof that some debts breathe longer than the people who owe them.